20 today. So let's turn there and we will get started with reading in chapter 20 of the book of Genesis, one of my favorite books. And you all can let me know who is going to start the reading. I don't have to read. You guys can read. So let's start. All right. No hands are raised. I'm waiting. I'm waiting for volunteers. All right. Crystal, you get to start reading. Genesis chapter 20. There you go.
And Abraham journeyed from thence toward the south country, and dwelt between Kadesh and Shur, and sojourned in Gerar. Gerar. And Abraham said of Sarah his wife, she is my sister. And what's his name?
Abimelech.
Abimelech, king of Gerar, sent and took Sarah. And God came to Abimelech in a dream by night and said to him, behold, thou art but a dead man, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. But Abimelech had not come near her. And he said, Lord, wilt thou slay also a righteous nation? Said he not unto me, she is my sister. And she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hand had I done this. And God said unto him in a dream, Yea, I know that thou doest this in the integrity of thy heart, for I also withheld thee from sinning against me. Therefore suffer I thee not to touch her. Suffer I thee not to touch her. Now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, thou know that thou shalt surely die, though and all that are thine.
Okay. William, why don't you pick up from there in verse 8? You ready? You need to unmute yourself, William.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay, verse 8.
Therefore Abimelech rose early in the morning and called all his servants and told all these things in their ears, and the men were sore afraid. Then Abimelech called Abraham and said unto him, What hast thou done unto us? And what have I offended thee, that thou hast brought on me and on my kingdom a great sin? Thou hast done deeds unto me that ought not to be done. And Abimelech said unto Abraham, What sawest thou, that thou hast done this thing? And Abraham said, Because I thought surely the fear of God is not in this place, and they will slay me for my wife's sake. And yet indeed she is my sister, she is the daughter of my father, but not the daughter of my mother, and she became my wife. And
All right. I'll pick up from there. And it came to pass, when God caused me to wander from my father's house, that I said unto her, This is thy kindness which thou shalt show unto me. At every place whither we shall come, say of me, He is my brother. And Abimelech took sheep and oxen and men servants and women servants, and gave them unto Abraham, and restored him Sarah his wife. And Abimelech said, Behold, my land is before thee. dwell where it pleaseth thee. And unto Sarah he said, Behold, I have given thy brother 1,000 pieces of silver. Behold, he is to thee a covering of the eyes, unto all that are with thee, and with all other. Thus she was reproved. And Abraham prayed unto God, and God healed Abimelech and his wife and his maidservants, and they bare children. For the Lord had fast closed up all the wombs of the house of Abimelech because of Sarah, Abraham's wife. Now, if you notice, at this point, Abraham is no longer Abram, but now the Lord has breathed upon him and he has become Abraham. And so let's just go straight into this. We're going to, just like we did last week, we're going to use the scriptures to pull out kingdom principles, dream interpretation principles, and today we're even going to add the function and purpose of dreams. We're going to pull out some of that today. So when we start here, we see that Abraham has journeyed to a place called Gerar, and Gerar was in the southern part of the continent between what they call Kadesh and Shur, or Shur. Now, as you saw, and the way this is written, it kind of gives you a summary. Well, it actually gives you details in the beginning, and then at the end it tells you why some of these things happen. So they had agreed that Abraham would be referred to as her brother rather than her husband. And oftentimes, I don't know if you have had this experience, but oftentimes I've had it taught that Abraham was a liar, when in fact Abraham was not a liar, because as you can see in the scriptures, they shared the same father but not the same mother. So they were what we would call today half brothers and half sister. So let's go down a little bit farther. It says, but God came. Okay, you don't have video. Hold on one second. Let me see what's going on. Can everybody else see me? Is anybody else having trouble seeing me? If you are having difficulty seeing me, raise your hand. Okay. I'm not quite sure what's going on with that. Maybe if you log out and log back in, you'll be able to actually see the video. Use the link that comes in your reminder email. Okay. So, let me just hold on one second to give that person a minute to get back on so they won't miss part of the recording or part of the lesson. Okay, let me know if you can see now. Are you able to see now? You can just type yes in the chat if you can see now. Okay, you're still not able to see. I'm not sure what's going on because everybody else can see me. I don't know how to tell you to fix that. I don't know if something may be blocking your camera, or if your camera may be turned the wrong way. You may want to try and turn your camera. But if you obviously you can hear me, so if you can hear me, that's good too. So here we are now in the 3rd verse, and it says, but God came to Abimelech in a dream. And this class may not be quite as long, let me say that, as the ones in the past, because this is, well, we'll just see. We'll just see. So here we see that Abimelech, God comes to Abimelech in a dream. And remember that dreams are encounters with God. They are supernatural experiences. But here we have God coming to Abimelech in a dream by night. So this is after he has basically retired. He's in his bed sleeping. Now let's just let's just think about this for a minute. Here this man is, if you can imagine with me, the Bible doesn't say this, but just imagine him lying in his bed or laying in his bed with his head upon his, heavy on his pillows. And he's probably sitting there thinking about, well, I just took this exquisitely beautiful woman and I can't wait to have her. And then he drifts off to sleep. And then while he's sleeping, it's not as pleasant. It's not as pleasant as the vision or the thoughts he was having, I'm sure, when he first drifted off to sleep. Because it says that when he went to sleep, God said to him, "Behold, thou art but a dead man for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife." Now, what do you, when I first read that, I thought, my God, you appear to me, and then you tell me I'm a dead man. What in the world is that all about? So let's just dissect this, if you will, or exegete it if you want to use religious jargon. Let's pull this apart and see what this is all about. So we see here that, of course, it was a dream. It came in the night, and the Bible tells us that. And it says that, and God said, in a dream, when God is speaking, he's sure to get your attention. There's something about the quality of his voice and the tone of his voice that lets you know that you are actually in communication with him. There's also something about the content of the communication that's being released that lets you know that you are in an encounter with the Lord. Okay, so here let me put my glasses back on, because I've got so much writing in my Bible that I can't see the words clearly. He says, but you are as a dead man. So we see what's implied here is that infidelity was against the law. Now, we have to remember, this is Old Testament. This is Genesis. And so they lived by the law in Genesis because they had not yet received Holy Spirit. And so because it was within his province or within his geographical region, he was the one, obviously, that had made the law. So here he was about to contradict his own self or his own law. Well, we know, just as an aside, God never contradicts himself. And so when we have dreams and visions, they should bring us into alignment with God's purpose, God's plan, and his word, because God never contradicts himself. And so here we see again, he says, behold, thou art but a dead man. So we can also imply that the sentence for such infidelity is death. He says, for the woman which thou hast taken, for she is a man's wife. Now, when we look at this, as long as Abraham was outside of Gerar, King Abimelech had no authority over them. He had no right to possess anything concerning Abraham. And so here we have, if you will, I just want to pull this out real quickly. Here we have a kingdom principle. Anything that comes into your territory or within your sphere of influence, you have a right to it. You have a right to take it, and you have a responsibility to keep it and use it for the purpose for which it was sent and intended. So I'm gonna that just kind of, that's so expansive when you think about things that come into your, well, not just your geographical location, but within the territory that you've been assigned by God. When you think about things that come into the into your sphere of influence. Now I'm going to open it up because I want us to just talk a little bit about that principle. A lot of times we get frustrated about the manifest, or not seeing the manifestation of things that God has promised to us. And so let's kind of flesh that out a little bit, because when God revealed that to me, it really helped me to understand some things. So who wants to be the first to kind of expound on that kingdom principle? Anytime something comes into your territory or sphere of influence, it belongs to you. That's the first thing. It belongs to you, and it is subject to your authority. So let me see by a show of hands who wants to kind of expound on that. And you know, if you don't raise your hand, then I will just pick somebody. So I'm going to start with Gatlin. All right, Gatlin, you're unmuted.
I think what that says, as I listen to you explain, I came a little late, but as I listen to you explain that if you are in an area and God has assigned you that area, and somebody comes into that area, then you have the authority to rule over them as they come into your area, and as you said, for the purpose that it was intended. Now, this man's intention was to have this beautiful woman, because the man had said that she was his sister. I believe. I hope I'm in the right place. He had said that she was his sister, and so he thought that he was just getting a woman, a wife, to add to the list of women that he had. He did not realize that he had been lied to, but he was quick to let her go once he realized that he was wrong.
Right. So when we talk about what comes into our sphere of influence or into our territory, we're not necessarily talking about people. I want us to expand on that. What other things can we add to that? Or what can we add, or how can we better understand that particular revelation? All right, I'm going to Laura Harris. You are unmuted.
Will you repeat that? I was trying to take some notes. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anything that comes into your territory and sphere of influence belongs to you. And and is subject to your authority. Okay, while you figure that out, while you think about it for a minute, I'm going to go to William. Okay, William, tell me what you have. Tell me what you think that means. How can we expand on that?
I would believe that especially in the area of prayer, that whatever place that God gives you territory over or authority over, especially in the area of prayer, is prevalent. So I would say, for example, if some new neighbors came into the city in a part of your sphere, and they began to do stuff that was ungodly or whatnot, you would be able to take authority over that and to pray against that. You really see that in the area in the ministry of deliverance, where God has anointed people who who cover different territories and atmospheres and whatnot. And you also see it in the demonic as well.
Okay. I think okay. All right, Gatlin, just give me one moment, please. What I'm hearing is everything being spiritual. But what I want you to do is to make it more practical. What is considered territory? What is considered your sphere of influence? And I'm going to tell you why I'm kind of pushing you all to expand on this in just a moment. Okay, Gatlin, you are unmuted. Let's hear you.
I'm thinking in these terms, and I'm going to take it to the modern terms. Let's say Thanksgiving, all of my kids are going to come home. And when they get to the house, whoever car is in the driveway, I'm going to get in it and drive it if I need to go somewhere. Okay? And because they've come to visit me, they're at my house. I'm going to ask them, of course, first. I'm going to tell them, hand me your keys because I'm going to drive your car. But they're at my house. They're in my driveway, and I need to go someplace. So because they're under my authority now, because they've come back home, I'm going to use whatever vehicle is most accessible to me. At the same time, while they're visiting with me, I'm not taking out any trash. I'm not washing any dishes because all of them are coming to my sphere of influence. And they're going to do those things while they're visiting. And when they're home, they'll be back at their own house.
Okay. All right. So that was a good example. All right. Crystal, you want to give it a try? All right. You're on.
I took it to mean that it doesn't matter what's going on or where I am. I have the power to control and influence my environment, whether I be in a store, if things are not going through any chaotic situation, I have the authority and the power to change it by me being there. So it doesn't matter where I am. I'm there to be, wherever I am, that's my territory. If I'm standing in the mall, and I have the power to speak or control over whatever atmosphere I'm in.
Okay. Yes. And so what I'm trying to get you all to see is that your territory and sphere of influence is not limited by the natural. What happens in your, I'm going to mute you again, I'm sorry. Okay, and so what happens when we define our territory or we define our sphere of influence, it encompasses it encompasses both the spiritual and the natural. And the reason I'm kind of pushing you in that direction is because when you dream and you interpret the symbols, you have to be able to look at the symbols both literally and figuratively. Now remember, when the symbols in the dreams have to be interpreted. The dream itself is not literal, but the symbols may be taken literally or they may be taken figuratively. And so we have to be able, we can't limit ourselves in the way we think about certain words. Unfortunately, the English language has taught us that. When we talk about territory, we usually think about geographical locations or some part of the earth, if you will. Excuse me. But when we actually think about territory, it expands far beyond, it expands far beyond what we consider to be natural. When we think about our sphere of influence, a sphere of influence is not something that's necessarily tangible, but we know that a sphere of influence affects people. It affects systems. It affects oh wow, I mean just a whole list of things. So I'm gonna I'm going to, from time to time, ask you to expand, and I'm going to use that word expand, because I don't want us to be limited in our thinking concerning certain symbols. We want to be able to examine the symbols from all, from different angles, from all sides, inside, you know, I mean, we want to, let's take, for instance, we can take this, for instance, this bottle of water that I have here. We can examine the outside of the bottle. We can examine the top of the bottle. We can look at the bottom of the bottle. We can look at what's on the inside of the bottle. We can look at the quantity. We can look at the quality of what's in the bottle. And all of those things taken together or separately can give a particular meaning or even change the meaning of a dream. So let's go on a little bit farther here. So Abimelech takes Sarah. He takes ownership of it. I mean, of her. Let's see. Okay, then in verse 4 it says, wait a minute. Okay, yeah. And so then in verse 4 it says that Abimelech had not come near her, and he said, Lord, will thou slay also a righteous nation? Remember last week we talked about in dreams, dreams are actually visitations from, well, sometimes they can be visitations from God. They are always encounters with God, but we can actually experience a visitation from God in our dreams, and that's precisely what Abimelech did. Now, the thing about this particular, about the dreamer in this particular chapter of the Bible is that Abimelech was not considered to be a godly king. Remember, because this is Kadesh and Shur were somewhere around Sodom. And so they weren't considered to be a godly nation. So here it says that he says, will thou slay also a righteous nation? Here King Abimelech did not limit himself to be an individual or his concern for an individual. He said a nation. Number one, realizing that the province over which he ruled would be affected by his demise, not only by his demise, but also if he actually did this act. The consequences of the act would bring a hardship upon everybody in the land. Another kingdom principle. Our actions affect more than just us. They are not limited to us as individuals, and so we have to come out of that selfish way of thinking that, well, if I do this, only I'll be affected, or only my family is going to be affected, or you know, people within my immediate sphere of influence or within my immediate location will be affected. We have to begin to look. One of the reasons God gives us dreams, and one of the functions of dreams, is to cause us to see farther, to see beyond the limitations of our own thinking or paradigms, if you will. And so here we see not only did he refer to himself as the nation, and that I wouldn't say that was out of arrogance, because clearly we see that he's talking to God, and he's speaking to him in a very humble tone, if you will. And he refers to himself, like I said, as a nation. So again, he sees himself bigger than just one individual human. But the other thing is he takes the responsibility of his office in this dream. So when we're dreaming, not only are our thoughts expanded, but we also can assume responsibility for things over which God has already given us authority. You can have authority and not be responsible. And so here we see that Abimelech is actually taking responsibility by way of his office as a king for his whole nation. So anything that he does, and this is really, a lot of intercessors understand this. When the Bible says that who shall ascend unto the hills, only he who has clean hearts, a pure heart and clean hands. There is a standard for living that must be met in order for God to move the way that he wants to move through an intercessor or by the prayers of an intercessor. Same thing here, or same principle here. In order for God to save the nation or to preserve the nation, the king or the head had to be in order or in alignment with the purposes and plans of God, the eternal purposes plan of God. Eternal purposes and plans of God. And we know from Genesis chapter 15 in the dream that Abram had before he became Abraham, God told him, go look in the sky. Remember, it was a vision. We talked about it last week. It was first a vision that it seemingly went on all day, and then at nightfall he actually went into the dream. But during the vision part of that experience or that encounter, God says, go and look at the stars, and if you can number them, that's how many your descendants are going to be. And so Abraham had a responsibility to bring forth all of those people that God showed him in the dream. He could not do that without Sarah. It was biologically impossible, number one, for him to bring forth a nation. So he had to have a wife, but God had already, when he changed Abraham's name, and when he breathed upon Abraham and changed his name to Abraham instead of Abram, he also breathed upon Sarah, and she was no longer Sarai, but she became Sarah, because the breath of God also came upon her. And so she was the one that was ordained to be able to carry the nation, to carry the stars, or the seed of Abraham. No one else was really anointed to be able to, well, let me say this, they were anointed to carry a seed, but they could not carry the seed of Abraham because of the weight and the responsibility of the seed of Abraham. And so we see again that, and if you have questions, please stop me. Please feel free to stop me if you have questions. Just raise your hand and I'll acknowledge you. Let me move that over. Okay. And so we go on down to verse 5 here, and it says, said he not unto me, she is my sister, and even she herself said, he is my brother. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. Well, well, well. Let's take a closer look at this. We see that in God's divine sovereignty and all of his omniscience, he tells Abimelech, listen, I know you took this woman, but she's your wife. That's a significant detail. She's the wife of another man. That's a significant detail that Abimelech needed. And so what we see here is that dreams give us greater details sometimes than we are that we can have or that we see in the natural. That being said, when we get down here to he said she's my sister, and even he said he's my brother. He says, I didn't do this because I had ill motives or because I was trying to secretly break the law. He says, I did this because of what they said to me, and I took them at their word. Now, why would Abraham lie And I know it feels like I'm just kind of going through a Bible study, but I promise you we're going to get to what this means for our dreams. Why would Abraham and Sarah tell this man, well, that's my sister, or that's my brother? Outside of the fact that we already see here on the, outside of the fact that we already see in the latter verses that they really are brother and sister, and they did it to preserve Abraham's life. Why would they do that? I'm not really sure. I can't answer that question. But what I can say to you is that Abraham was God's chosen. And because of Abraham's righteousness, God wanted to also keep him from being in sin or being against the will of God. Well, actually, we hadn't received it yet, but we know that lying is against the will of God. So let me go back. Let me go back 1 second. I lost my place. Just 1 second, I'll find it. Okay, and so Abraham put himself in a position where God had to protect him. And so sometimes we can do things that would cause an ill reaction or ill effect upon our own lives. And in order for God to preclude or prevent that from happening, the person, well, not necessarily the person or the thing that would actually be the thing that would cause harm to us, God can preclude it from actually operating. Or if it's a person, then he can, just like he did for Abimelech, give them a dream and speak to them through the dream to let them know that their behavior or their proposed behavior is against his will or his eternal purpose and plan. So in this instance, we see that the dream protected not only Abimelech, but it also protected Abraham. While Abraham thought he was telling the half-truth, if you will, because that's exactly what it was a half-truth. They were indeed brother and sister, but they were also husband and wife. So in telling the half-truth, he thought that he would be able to protect and preserve his own life. And so a lot of times we will do things that will if you will, infringe upon the sovereignty of God in our lives. And so God will, like he did in this instance, give a dream to put us back into alignment by way of protection. It says also here, and so we see here where this particular dream is a double, I don't want to say a double-edged sword, but in some instances it really is, because it's protecting both the godly and the ungodly. A lot of times we allow our ways of thinking or our paradigms or worldly information to affect our relationship with the Lord and the way we process things from the Lord. And so with our dreams, again, they confirm, they enlighten, and they enrich our relationship with the Lord. Let's go down a little bit farther. And like I said before, dreams give us details and specific information to help us to make decisions or to achieve the task that's been assigned. So here we see that Abimelech needed the information that Sarah was actually Abraham's wife so that he would not get into sin. Down in verse 6. Let me make sure I got through all. In the integrity of my heart and innocency of my hands have I done this. Okay. And God said unto him in a dream. Now, it would appear that this was two dreams. Did anybody catch that? He was in a dream state in verse 3, but then it appears that he's in another dream in verse 6. So you can't have a dream within a dream. It is possible to have a dream within a dream, and the reason that you do that is a little bit more advanced than I want to get into right now, but suffice it to say that a dream within a dream actually can mean that the dream will happen sooner than later, because it's a confirmation of a confirmation, if that makes any sense to you. It can also mean that it's hidden until an appointed time, because the time of your dreams, when you have a dream within a dream, there's no way for you to actually be able to tell what the timing is of that dream. And so God has to perform it in a way. Let me see, how do I explain that? He will perform it, or he will bring it to pass at a time that you know not of. Let me say that. You would not be able to, if you will, pinpoint a certain time or a specific season for that dream within the dream to come to pass. And so this is an example, again, like I said, of a dream within a dream. What's so unusual, though, about this, or excuse me, or what appears to be unusual about this, is that, again, it was given to King Abimelech, and who was, like I said, considered to be an ungodly king. And so God does not limit the information that he gives only to he doesn't limit it to the godly, but there is some information which we saw in the scriptures last week, that those things which are revealed to us belong to us. And so here we see that Abimelech received revelation, and so because he received it, he took ownership of it, and he actually acted upon upon the information that God gave him. So God's omniscience was able to, and you may say, well, God knows everything, but God's omniscience actually served as a word of knowledge in this particular instance. Again, like I said, the details and the specific information that he gave to Abimelech concerning Abraham and Sarah's relationship was one thing. But when you look at it, well, let me say this. It was not one thing. It was given so that he could preclude and prevent him from sinning. It was a means of protection for both him and Abraham. But when we look at this again, let me see. I keep losing my place, and I'm sorry. I have all my writing in my Bible tonight. Okay, I lost my spot on that one, but I know we were talking about the omniscience of God here. And so in his omniscience, excuse me, and so in his omniscience, he was able to, like I said, protect both Abimelech and Abraham. Okay, he says, and because the king in this particular instance had no motive to or ill will towards Abraham or Sarah. He just liked it. It came into his territory, and he took it. He took her, rather, not to refer to her as a thing, but he took her. And what's interesting is that in a dream, God revealed to Abimelech who Abraham really was. He says, listen, this man is a prophet. And you know, in biblical times, the prophets got great respect because people understood that they were the mouthpiece of God. And so he says, listen, if you heed to what I'm saying to you, this man will pray for you and you will live and not die. And so he says, listen, the only way that you're going to live is if you take heed to what I'm telling you in this dream. And so here we see, well, let me say it this way. In a dream, remember, dreams are not one of the spiritual dream interpretation, that is not one of the spiritual gifts that's listed in 1 Corinthians. But what we see here is the operation of at least 3 of those spiritual gifts. We see the word of wisdom, well, the word of knowledge, which I told you before, which came about from the details about the information that he had been given. And so God clarified that and gave him even, more specific information. We also see here that there is a word of wisdom. Words of wisdom tend to come as warnings and also with instruction. A word of wisdom, if someone only gives you a warning, that's not a complete word of wisdom. Wisdom always gives instruction, and you can find that scripturally in Proverbs 8. Wisdom brings both a warning or prudence, if you will, and instruction. And so we see that he says that if Abraham will pray for you, if Abraham prays for you, you will live. And so he told him how to preserve his life. So what he did was he gave him a requirement. In the dream, you can actually get an instruction or a requirement, if you will, in order for the manifestation of something that was in your dream to happen. If you fail to if you fail to actually fulfill or to follow the instruction in wisdom or the word of wisdom, then you will bring upon yourself a type of death. When I say a type of death, I don't mean the type of death that requires you, or the type of transition, if you will, from earth into heaven that requires your body to be buried, or to be burned, if that's what you choose. But I'm talking about the kind of death that precludes God's most excellence in your life. And so there we have yet another kingdom principle. Excuse me, guys. I'm having some sinus issues as well tonight. So there we see the oh, goodness gracious. Whew. Okay, so let's move on from there. The other thing is that we see a prophecy. The gift of prophecy is actually being used in this dream. And the thing about a prophecy, remember that a prophecy is always forth-telling or forward-telling. Excuse me. And it also can give instructions or can give some information to detailed information, if you will, to confirm the word once it actually comes to pass or manifest. And so here in this particular chapter, what we saw, or what we see, is that God actually gave a word of prophecy in, let me see, in verse 7, it's right there in verse 7. He says, now therefore restore the man his wife, for he is a prophet, and he shall pray for thee, and thou shalt live. And if thou restore her not, know thou that thou shalt surely die, thou and all thine, and thou and all that are thine. If we go down a little bit farther, we see that in this particular instance, God was causing death by actually shutting up the wombs of all the females so that none of them could bear children. Now, when he actually did that, the Bible does not enlighten us to that information or give us that information. But we do see that even in your dream, failure to follow the instructions of your dream can make permanent, if you will, the things that are out of order in your life. So the information that's contained in dreams, like I said before, alter and shift. They can make significant changes in your life. And it's only in verse 8 that we see that Abimelech actually rose from those dreams. So again, he had the dream within the dream. And when he arose, he immediately acted upon the information that the Lord had given to him. God gave him what I would call hidden insight, so that he could act wisely, or so that he could actually do what God wanted him to do to preserve God's eternal purpose. What's interesting also is that God did not give him the dream to embarrass him or to bring shame upon him or to condemn him, if you will. Dreams may provide information that is not necessarily something that you would want to have publicized or to have other people know. But whenever God reveals something something that we would consider to be negative in a dream, it is never to embarrass. It's never to put anybody down, to condemn them, and certainly not to confuse us, because he says in his word that he is not the author of confusion. And so we know that, excuse me, so we know that God's plan for us is always to add to us, to cause us to grow, to encourage us, always positive. Whenever we receive a dream, it's always positive. Even though the elements or the symbols in the dreams can seemingly or appear to be something negative, a true dream, or what I would call a dream from God, always has a positive message, even though we may have to deal with something negative within the dream or once we're outside of the dream. And I think I may have said this last week. When we have a dream, and we can even see here in the dreams that Abimelech had here in Genesis chapter 20, when you have a dream, it helps you to understand yourself better. And in fact, when you first have a dream, you should first apply it to yourself. Excuse me. Because it can actually change, or I don't want to say change. I've used that word several times, but dreams cause us to see ourselves in a different light, if you will. So the dream of Abimelech, once God gave him the details of the dream, it gave him enough insight into the true circumstances, or into what I would call the life circumstances so that he could actually reason what would be, and in this particular case, reason isn't even a good word to use, because actually God gave him the specific instructions. He didn't have to think about it. He didn't have to, as a matter of fact, he didn't even have to get this dream interpreted. And the reason that I surmise, just based on my understanding of dreams, is that because he was an ungodly king, and we even know that's one of the reasons that Abraham told them that Sarah was his sister, and she told them that he was her brother, because Abraham didn't believe that they actually feared God or wanted to obey the laws of God. And so the reasoning behind his telling Abimelech what he did was given in a dream, because otherwise Abimelech would never have known that information had God not revealed it to him. Does anybody have any questions? And so we see here that dreams have many functions. Dreams can warn. Dreams can preserve life. Dreams can protect us. Dreams can, the details of, well, I don't want to talk about the details of the dream too much. I want to focus on the actual dream, the composite dream, and what it will actually do. Dreams can dreams function, if you will, to give or to acknowledge or to reveal ministry calls, just like when the Lord told Abimelech that Abraham was a prophet. Dreams serve as a means of intercession, or a method, excuse me, a method of intercession. Okay, I am going to open up the floor now. We have about 30 more minutes, but I'm going to open up for questions or information. I know this particular session was a little sketchy, and I apologize for that. But if anybody has any questions, or if they would like to add to some of the information based on their own understanding of this particular scripture, I would be more than happy to allow you to do that. Okay, nobody is saying anything. You guys are going to have to talk to me about what you're learning. You're not limited to the information that you get tonight. The information, if there are other biblical principles or dream interpretation principles that you recognize in this particular scripture, feel free to pull it out, because everybody may not see that. When I'm presenting the lessons to you, I'm focusing on building upon what you've already learned. So let's just, actually, let's do that. Let's go back and look at this and see, based on information that we got last week. Last week we looked at Abraham in Genesis chapter 15. So are there any principles or dream principles that we actually can pull out of Genesis chapter 20? And Laura, I'm going to start with you. Okay.
Repeat that, please.
Based upon the previous lesson from Genesis chapter 15, or you can even go back as far as the introduction in chapter 1. What, if any, dream interpretation principles can you find in chapter 20? Now, if somebody else wants to give it a go, please, by all means, raise your hand. How about dreams shifting and affecting the economy? Does somebody want to expound on that as it relates to Genesis chapter 20? All right, Mr. Gatlin, you're unmuted, sir.
Well, we do find that once the dream is over and the man restores, Abimelech restores Sarah to Abraham, he tells her, behold, he tells her how much money he had given her brother and how much cattle and property he had given her. So there was a shift in economy because Abraham actually gained after this dream was finished. Because the man was honoring the prophet, not necessarily the man, but he was honoring the prophet after he realized that Abraham was a prophet. So he blessed him with an offering.
Now, so how did that apply to the dream? What is the dream principle or the dream interpretation principle that we have in that?
The dream interpretation principle.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say that in the process of the dream, once he learned what was actually going on, and he realized that a prophet was in his presence, in that day and time, it was always that when the man of God came into your presence, you gave him a gift. And when he realized that this was a man of God, that is how he responded. I don't know if that's a principle of the dream or not.
The principle for dream interpretation is that I was trying to get you to go to is that once you have the dream, you have a responsibility. Excuse me, you have a responsibility to actually respond to the information in the dream. And here, that's precisely what Abimelech did. He responded to the information that he had been given in a dream, which caused Abraham's economy to be shifted. Now, there's one version that I've read that called Abraham a wealthy man even before Abimelech gave him those things. So even the instruction in a dream is not limited by your current circumstances or your current state or position. All right, anybody else? Anybody else want to give it a go? So somebody tell me some of the dream principles, dream interpretation principles that we've gotten already from Genesis chapter 2 and Genesis 15. Boston? Ready?
The principles that we've discussed in Genesis chapter 20.
Not necessarily in 20. I'm talking about in previous lessons. Remember, the information that we're getting, we're building upon that information, so that by the time we get to the 7th week, we should be able to actually interpret a dream pretty accurately. But in order to actually begin to interpret dreams, we need to understand what the principles are. Okay. Remember, we talked about dreams being dreams revealing promises. Do we see anything, or actually, that covenant can actually be entered into while you're in a dream state? So we can see here even that God honored his covenant with Abraham from Genesis 15 to so that he could bring forth all of the seed that God had shown him, which he, equated to the actual stars. Now, let's see. Now, I believe that the dream in Genesis chapter 20 is pretty literal and requires minimal interpretation. But are there symbols in the dream that would lend itself to the interpretation that is actually written in Genesis chapter 20 of this dream? Laura, answer that question for me.
I'm sorry, I was reading. Will you repeat that?
Oh, goodness, I don't remember what I said. We'll go on to something else because I don't remember the question. If somebody else wants to repeat the question and give an answer, that would be fine, but I don't remember the question. Remember, I'm not writing these down. I'm just I'm going through them. It's a live recording, so as I'm giving you the information, I'm not remembering everything. Hold on just one second. Okay, Laura?
You were talking about, you said something about the symbols, and that's why I was reading, flipping back through the chapter. You were inquiring about some symbols.
Okay.
But I didn't get all of it because I heard symbol, I started reading, looking for them.
So, are there symbols in chapter 20 that would lend themselves to some type of interpretation? Let's talk about the symbols. What are some of the symbols in chapter 20? Okay, William, why don't you answer that question? What are some of the symbols in chapter 20?
I would say where they were, the southern country.
That's not...
Like kind of where their dwelling place is, where Kadesh and Shur, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Okay, but think about this now. That was not part of the dream. We're talking about the symbols actually in the dreams. That was just that was like an introduction to let us know where he was when the dream actually took place, or why he was there. But when we're talking about the symbols and what needs to be interpreted, what's actually in the dream? Is there anything in there that we could possibly interpret and get further revelation upon in these dreams?
I have to be honest, I'm kind of having some difficulty with it.
Okay. Thank you for being honest. Okay. Anybody else? Okay, Mr. Gatlin, just one second. Okay, you're unmuted.
uh, prophet in this dream. This dream was kind of very plain. God just actually spoke to Abimelech and just more or less told him what he wanted him to know and why he wanted him to know it. I'm not saying there are not symbols in there, but this is kind of just one of the plain. He just plain out talked to him when he lay down and went to sleep, and he really didn't need to go to anybody to interpret this for him because God spoke so plainly to him that when he woke up, he knew. He called Abraham to him and said, "Look, what have you done? What did you see that made you do this to us?" And just told him that this is your wife, you know. And in the dream, God just showed him everything that he needed to know, so that he could restore the woman to the husband.
Yes, but always remember that a dream, the revelation of a dream is progressive. Well, any revelation, period, is always progressive. And yes, that's what we see right here on the surface. But let's look at some of the symbols. Let's pull out some of the symbols. One of the first things that we see is that Abimelech is a king. So what can we say about a king? Somebody take that. Tell me what are the characteristics or the traits or things about a king that would that might give us greater insight into what's really meant in the Genesis chapter 20. Okay, Galen, I'm coming back to you.
Okay, one of the things that when we think about a king, we think about leadership. And we think about a person that is the head of a body of people or a group of people. So then we think about authority with the king.
Okay. All right. Now let's look at the woman and or the wife. At one point, Sarah was called a woman, and then at another point, she was called a wife. Harris, let's see what you have to say about that.
Helpmeet. One who can possibly bear children or child, bring can birth.
Okay. Okay, Crystal, just one second. Okay, Crystal.
I think it could mean that when she was called a woman, she was referred to as who Abimelech saw her. But when she was referred to as a wife, it was who she really was to Abraham.
Okay, that's good. That's very good. So then you would say that what we focused on before God revealing who Abraham was, he also revealed who Sarah really was to Abimelech. She was a wife and not just a woman, not just a female who could actually, who had a womb that could carry a child. Why would you think, why do you think that God shut the wombs of all the females in King Abimelech's region? Anybody want to take a stab at that? Nobody? All right, William. Okay, William.
The covenant that God had made with Abraham is what comes to my mind because he said that he would bless those who bless him, but he would also curse them who curse them. So with the king having that in his heart to do that, cause a curse to not only come up on him, but to come up on his nation.
Okay. All right. Crystal?
when the end of that question was blurted out, you said, why would God cause the women? Repeat the question.
Why would God call her a woman in one area and a wife in another? Oh no, that was the previous question. This question was why did God close up the wombs of all the women in King Abimelech's province?
Well, the womb. Well, we know the womb is designed to give birth, to multiply.
So, with that being said, let's look at this. So, when he tells Abimelech that he was as a dead man, he was as a dead man for taking Sarah. But then, a little bit farther, Abimelech refers to himself as a nation. Is it possible, might you think, that when he says that he was going to slay the righteous slay all the righteous in the nation, that when he closed up the wombs of the women, that would cause the nation to go into some type of a deficit, or into that was their proverbial death, if you will, because they were unable to bring forth any more life. So the thing that we know about a woman, of course, is that she does have a womb and she can carry and nurture. The other thing that we know about a wife is that she's a nurturer. She's the one that she's not only a nurturer, but she's also a why am I having a blank? She takes care of all the domestic responsibilities for the household, or at least in biblical times, that's what she did. Oh gosh, we only have about 12 minutes. Let me go to another symbol. Okay, brother and sister. What do we think that means? And I may have shared a little bit of that with you all last week. But what about a brother and a sister? No hands up on that one, huh? Brothers and sisters tend to have close relations. And sometimes a brother and sister can be opposite. A boy and a girl, they're opposite. So we have to be able, again, what I'm trying to get you to do is to think outside of the realm of what you know about and look at it figuratively. Look at the symbol figuratively. So when we have a brother and sister, like I said, it could mean opposites. It could mean male and female. It could also mean no gender at all, because one cancels out the other. So there are, again, what I'm trying to get you to do is exercise a form of imagination that will allow you to give meaning to symbols in your dreams in a different way. Let's say, for instance, what if I said something about a lamp or a light? What would that mean to you? Let's go with, who else is here? Okay, let's go with Gatlin.
A lamp or a light to me means that something is getting ready to be uncovered. Some light is getting ready to be shown on something. To me, that's what lights do. They dispel darkness and they uncover things.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to add to that about a lamp or a light? Anybody? All right. All right. You're unmuted. Hello.
Brings exposure. It helps to identify a place, identity.
Okay. So it doesn't seem to really be flowing. And the more we look at symbols, and I'm going to try to save time for us to do that, the more we look at the different symbols, the easier the flow will come of being able to look at things and see them outside of a confined definition, if you will, or outside of what we already know and understand that particular thing to mean. Okay, well, I think that's pretty much all that we can cover today. Are there any questions about homework assignments? And I will post the questions. Some of the questions are well, not some of them. Yeah, some of the questions are already available in the material section for tonight's session. I will post the workbook portion by the end of the day tomorrow. I won't promise you that I'll post it tonight, only because I took some sinus medicine and I don't feel like I can really focus very well. Let's see, what else? Are there any other administrative things that we need to take care of? Oh, well, you all, the other thing is, if you can't, I didn't get homework from everybody, but if you can't send me the attached document in an email transmission, you can actually submit your homework through the materials. Once you can go through and actually answer your questions and click submit, and I should be able to get, it should come directly to the KGM email, and I will have access to be able to grade your assignment or your quote-unquote test. Most of the materials that you are, your homework assignments are listed under test and not under materials. Yes, I did receive your dream assignment. However, I did not receive your workbook assignment. Let's see. And remember, the homework assignments from the workbook are typically due on Thursday nights. The the dream interpretation assignments are always due on Saturdays. And your dream interpretation assignment for this week, last week you actually sent me a summary of your dream with the symbols. This week I want you to take a stab at interpreting that exact same dream. I don't need a new one. Let's just work with that particular dream. And I want you to actually give me an interpretation of what that dream and the symbols combined. Put that puzzle together using those symbols that were in your dream and get a big picture and tell me what that dream means. And so that will be due on Saturday. Remember, this is the dream that you just submitted this past week. I want you, and you gave me a summary and a list of your symbols. So now what I want you to do is, if you haven't already done it, For each symbol that you listed, give me a meaning or a definition for it, and then give me the interpretation of the dream as a whole. I saw a hand over here. Whose hand was up? Was it Gatlin? Did you have your hand up? Did you have a question? Yes. Okay.
I was just checking to see if you were able to get my assignments. I sent them back to you on from the lesson itself where it says submit.
You know, no, I didn't. I didn't get that.
Okay.
So it's supposed to come to my email address.
Okay.
So that's something that I need to check on, because I just told you guys that it did work, and I guess it didn't work. So I need to figure out where your assignment is. Okay. Anybody else have any questions? And in case, okay, remember your weekly assignments are found at the end of your chapter in your workbook. So you have questions at the end of the chapter in your workbook that should be submitted. And those are the same ones, like I said, that can be found in the test on the site. And so if you have not submitted it, you still do have time to submit it. I will still accept past assignments. Any other questions? We have 3 minutes. 3 minutes. Any comments? You don't have to ask a question. Is there any comment that you'd like to make, or any information that you'd like to share? Does anybody have a dream that they want to share? And we will, as a class, that was quick. As a class, we will try to interpret that dream. Okay, there you go. Let's hear it.
I just want to say that taking this class has really unlocked something within me. I've always been a dreamer, because I know since God came into my life, and like you, I especially in the beginning, I looked forward to going to sleep, even to the point of purposely going to sleep and oversleeping just to see what God would show me next. But my dreams have gone to another level. Even my wife has testified to it. And recently, the Holy Ghost gave me an interpretation of one particular dream that I had recently, and just taking what you have been teaching us in the class. Then I listened to a little bit of what Prophet Jonathan had put out during one of his periscopes, which was basically the same information about dreams. You know, you guys have made it so simplistic. You know, if you're a prophet and you know how to hear in the spirit, you operate in the prophetic, it's practically the same thing. You know, it's just being able to give the Lord time to be able to sit, to be quiet, and allow Him to open up, you know, what He has shown to you. And so, I say all that to say that the class has really been a blessing to me.
Great, great. Glad to hear that. Glad to hear that. Anybody else have a question or a dream you'd like to share? A quick dream. Nobody? Y'all know, did you notice I didn't give you a poll today? Oh, goodness. Okay. Well, we are 25 seconds out. And so with that, I will bid you adieu and sweet dreams until next week. Again, check the site tomorrow for Chapter 3. It'll probably be in the early morning or mid-afternoon before I can actually get it posted. And thank you so much for being here, and I hope you're learning a lot. Good night.